Hey everybody, I wanted to cover a quick question that I've been asked, and that is, do Chameleon Pens work on Grayscale coloring book pages? And the answer is yes, they work beautifully. I'm going to cover a couple here today. The first one I want to cover is this book, Spellbinding Images by Nikki Burnett. I think it's great because it shows you a lot of skin tones and hair, different ways to get highlights, shades, and shadows, and different fairies and mermaids, and it's really kind of fun fantasy images. And with Grayscale, it actually has sort of built-in shadows and shading, which is really great for learning. If you're not quite sure, like our color cards show you, it gives you an idea of where you put the highlights, where you put the shadows, and where you put the shading. You're just actually going to color right over top of it. And because of the way our markers go from light to dark, it's really kind of natural. It works really well with it. Now, there is some instruction inside of Nikki's book, which is great. She shows you how to work with marker pen techniques, and she has some advanced marker pen techniques that she shows on a 4-step process using multiple marker pens as well to get that depth and dimension. So that's one way of doing it, and then there's also the Chameleon way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to color this little lady here. Arden is her name, and I'm going to use the Dark Sage, and this is GR2. This is from our Nature 5-pack, our new Nature 5-pack, and I'm just going to give this a little bit of a fuse, and I'm going to fuse it for probably about 15 seconds, making sure that you're keeping the pen straight up and down. That's important, and that your nibs are touching. And remember, the longer that you fuse this, the lighter that the color is going to be, that basically the longer the blend is going to be for you. And really the key is it's like watercoloring with your marker pens. We're basically diluting the color at the source, and you want a little test place off to the side to see where you're at. Now I'm just going to work this like I would if I'm thinking about this working from light to dark, and I'm utilizing what they've done here, what she's done in terms of where the shading and shadows are. And we're going from an absolute absence of color into color. Now I'm going to show you a little trick here, because I'm not going to do the whole piece here, but just sort of in one go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, I'm going to fit the other part of this area, giving it another fuse and working from light to dark. So we're working along with the shading and shadowing that she's got in the image already. And remember, these are alcohol inks, so they're really fantastic. You can overlay the colors. And you see, all I did was I went back and re-infused. It's kind of like dipping it back into the water. So you get this depth and dimension, you get the shadows, the shading, the highlights, and a little bit more. You can go layering color over top of color if you want to, or the same color, so you get even more depth. Now again, we're going from an absolute absence of color to color, so you're going very light into the mid, into the dark. If you wanted this area to not be so light, if you want it to be a little bit darker, one of the simplest ways to do this is you can fuse the pen again and then start in once it's done into a little bit darker. Another way you can do that is you can even take a lighter color green, and I'm showing you this because it's really quite neat. I'm not going to actually fuse this pen. I'm just using it as a solid color, because remember, it's an alcohol marker pen that does more. But I don't have to worry about blending those colors together, because the transition is going to be pretty natural, just because of the fact that we went from that natural color gradation of absence of color to color. And you get that really cool, smooth, seamless blend that is very simple to do. Again, if you want it a little bit darker, like what she's done along there, I can even use the bullet nib and get in here and get even some extra shading and shadows all along there. And I went back in with the GR2 again. So you can do it as a 1-pen blend, or you can do it as a 2-pen blend. But the beauty about it is you really don't have to worry so much about the blending part of it, because I went from that absence of color and just laid that color right over top, so there is no seams. It gives you that natural shading and shadows that are actually built inside of the Grayscale picture. So it's fantastic. The next one I'm going to do is Bennett Klein, and I love his work, and I'm going to show you how to work with hair using the Grayscale as well. It's pretty simple to do, and it works great with Chameleon Pens. So this is the other one, a Grayscale I wanted to show you, and it's called Color My Sketchbook by Bennett Klein, and they're Grayscale sketches, and some of these are just to die for. I've actually pulled a lot of them out because I want to get to coloring them. It's just incredible the work that he does, all the fabric folds, such fine detail. Those flowers are going to be so much fun coloring, just going from the light to the dark using a chameleon. It's going to look unbelievable. Fabric folds, all that. So we're going to get to showing you more of his work, but I just wanted to quickly show you how to do some hair that using the Grayscale. I'm actually going to use 2 pens with this. I'm going to use the YO2, and that's the mellow yellow. And I'm going to use the NU4, and that's the caramel color. Because I want to show you the method I'm using here is where I want to see highlights, when you want to see shading and shadows. You can use different colors, but you can also ease into those colors. So I'm fusing very short fuse for the YO2 because it's such a light color. So what I'm going to do is I'm getting on in here, and I'm going to just go from that highlight and then into the darker color. I didn't fuse it very long because I want to keep it in a very light tint of the mellow yellow. I don't want it to go too clear on me. And then the same thing on the other side. I'm just testing that off to the side, and I'm just giving that a little blend. And then as it starts to change, you can see it's starting to get to the darker tone. So we're still keeping that highlighted area. But I've seen this colored. I always like looking at what other people are doing on the coloring groups. I've seen it colored a couple of different ways. I could leave it kind of like that. So I'm going in there and keep that as the highlight. It's a little wet right now, but it'll dry and you'll be able to see that light to dark highlight, and it's very simple to do, and that's just using 1 pen. But what I can do as well is I can ease in with a second color. And this one's a little darker, just to show you the color here. This is the NU4. That is the caramel color, and I think that's actually a color that's in our new skin tone pack. So I can take this and I can overlay inside here. So rather than going directly on top, if I want to add some of those reddy brown tones into there and where the darker areas are, I just want to ease into the color. So I want just to have a little lightness and then work it down into the dark to add a little bit of color there. So that's adding a little bit of the reddy brown into there. Now you can even, if you want, do that from a light to dark perspective too. I'm going to show you that on the side here. So if I wanted to go from light to dark in the reddy brown, it doesn't change immediately. Do you see how I sort of hang in there? So there's a slightly different hair color going from light to dark. So you can combine multiple colors together to get different looks. If they're lighter colors, remember, if you're putting a lot of ink down, cover your surface, because if you're not using really thick paper, you're going to find that it would bleed through. And as you're coming down here, this is kind of neat. There's your 2 different hair tone colors there, but just to show you, I can get back in here, and some neat tricks are to just go back in. I just flipped around to get the pure caramel, because you can add some really interesting detail just by using the pure color in there too, and almost pulling that back in. So there's different ways you can do it. You can lay multiple colors on top of one another. You can use it as a regular marker and just color straight yellow and then ease in with a second color if you want. I'm having a lot of fun with this. We want to highlight there, so I'm going to just hit that with a dash of color, keeping that in the light area. See, now it almost becomes an element of color hopping, because as I know I've started to spend out the toning medium, I'm going to go back to certain areas and darken that back up. But that way you get a more realistic effect. I wonder what happened. I just want to try this if we throw in our yellow. So get some of that toning medium out of there. And let's just put the color overlay right over top of all of this and see what happens there. That's kind of neat too. Again, that's a little wet at the moment, but once it dries, you'll see it becomes It's not so gray looking. So here what I did was I laid the color straight down, and then I used the NU4 to be able to add some interesting low lights to her. But what I did do is I didn't necessarily go straight on like that. I fused the pen so that it was just a little softer color rather than being such an intense difference. So it blends in a lot nicer, as you can see. Here we just used a straight YO2 and we just used it from light to dark. And here I used the NU4 and I went from light to dark and then threw a little bit of yellow on top of that too. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. She will be a very fun piece to color for you. Again, it's Bennett Klein, Color My Sketchbook, and we hope to show you a lot more of his work coming up.